Listen. Turn me up, turn me up, turn me up. Come on.
MMA Today is produced by Sweet Sports and Entertainment, and you can check them out at sweetse.com. Welcome back to MMA Today. We've got a special guest with us today, Ed Herman. Ed is a UFC fighter. He's got a fight coming up. Ed, are you there with us?
Yeah, I'm here, guys. What's happening?
Hey, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. You've got something coming up soon. You want to tell us a little bit about where you're at in your preparations?
Well, I'm about close to 4 weeks out, just under 4 weeks out. So, coming down, starting to peak out, the intense part of my training camp. Last couple of weeks of real hard training to get ready for this fight, February 4th.
Now, where are you at in terms of weight at this point?
I'm probably around 200 pounds.
And what do you got to get down to?
Got to get down to 186.
Okay. So is that going to be a tough cut for you, or is that something that you're used to?
That's something I'm used to. We got it down to a science, to where we can make it happen pretty easy as we get closer.
Now, having been in the Ultimate Fighter show, was that something that you felt was a great educational experience, or what's your take on it now, looking back, since it's been so long?
It was a great opportunity to, get a chance to let the fans relate with you a little bit and kind of, get quite a bit of exposure. It was a good experience overall for my career.
That's awesome. Have you done any research on your upcoming opponent?
I've watched a little tape on him, and, that's about it, really. Looked him up, looked up his wrestling record and stuff like that.
Okay. And the upcoming fight, it's going to be on Fuel?
Correct.
Where?
I think I'm on the main card now.
Okay. And where are the fights taking place?
They're taking place in Las Vegas at Mandalay Bay, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, that's just down the street from where the last one was at in the MGM. So that's an exciting place to be. Have you done a lot of the fighting out there in your career?
I've fought in Vegas, half a dozen times. It's a great place to fight. It's Fight Town. It's a quick flight from Colorado, so it's a nice, easy place to get to. Sometimes those long travels can affect you a little bit, so it's a fight fairly close to home and easy for my friends and family to travel there.
Well, that's good. And before you were with the UFC, where were you bouncing around in your career?
I was fighting, all over the place. I fought in Japan. I fought, a lot of different places in the U.S. A lot of times in Oregon too. I came up in a promotion called Sport Fight in Oregon.
That's interesting. Now, was at that time when you first got into the UFC, did you still feel like this is it? This is the place to be? By that point in time, they were already a significant organization compared to some of the other places you fought?
Yeah, man, the UFC has been the ultimate goal since the beginning. They were the first big show out there, especially in the States. It's the top tier place to be.
Now, having fought in Japan, did you notice a difference with the crowds there? Because actually some of the bigger fights, or I shouldn't say bigger fights, but the bigger attended fights have been in Japan because they've had, before the UFC was big, the MMA was a bigger event in Japan. So was it something you experienced as far as the difference with the type of fans in Japan?
For sure, the crowd's a lot quieter and a little more respectful than the American fans can be. Just a different culture, different atmosphere. It was a great experience getting to go over there and compete.
Now, when you competed in Japan, were you fighting in a boxing ring as opposed to a cage?
Yeah, I did fight in a ring, so that's a little bit different for sure.
And what do you think how do you assess it in terms of what you like better and what the advantages or disadvantages?
I like the cage. I've fought most of my career in a cage. I've fought in them both quite a bit, actually, but I like the cage better. The rings, people get tied up in the ropes, and you see them kind of, moving guys back in the middle, or you can get your arms caught up in there, especially for a guy on top trying to ground and pound. Sometimes the ropes can get in the way, and guys can kind of scoot their way out. So I prefer the cage. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide.
And you know what? I think most of the fans do too. I mean, don't get me wrong, when you're at an event live, it's a little harder to see through the cage because sometimes the lights will reflect off the cage and you don't get the best view. But obviously when you're watching it on pay-per-view or on the big screen, you're getting a great view. And the cage does offer some definite advantages in terms of just confining the fight and not usually running into a situation where you have to stop the fight, like you said, because somebody's falling out of the ring or tied up in the ropes or anything like that. That's too much reminiscent of professional wrestling, which it doesn't really ring true to the sports fan who likes to see a true competition. Now, when you go to the fight, who goes with you? You have a team that goes with you?
Yeah, I have a team that goes with me. One of my coaches and teammates, Ryan Schultz, who I opened my gym out here in Colorado with, Trials MMA. He goes with me. My strength coach, Ken, and either my old MMA coach, Robert Fallis. But I think I'm going to have my new boxing coach, Trevor Whitman from The Grudge, out there with me this time as well.
Is there anybody from your gym that's fighting besides you?
Yeah, Ryan the Lion Schultz, he was the former IFL world champ before that promotion shut down a few years back. He, fought over in Sengoku in Japan, and he's, been all over the world competing. He took a few years off with some injuries, but he's back on track now. Just picked up his first win, or his first fight back after 2.5 years out a couple weeks ago in a show called Ring of Fire out here in Colorado. So you're looking forward to seeing him back in the UFC or in the UFC. He also just went down to 145 pounds, so he should make a run here at the title, I would think.
Now, in your division, who would you consider the top guys that you would look to fight if you get over this hurdle?
Well, obviously Anderson Silva's the champ. I'd love a piece of him. But there's a couple other guys, in the top 10. I'd love a shot at Michael Bisping. Really anybody in the top 10, I'd love to get my hands on to prove that I, belong in the upper echelon of middleweight fighters in the world.
Ed, this is Jim, and again, I want to thank you for taking the time today. A question off topic a little bit, being out there in Colorado. Are you a football fan at all?
I am a football fan. I just got done watching the Broncos game. It was pretty awesome.
So obviously you know where I was leading with the whole overtime.
Yeah. I was never really a Broncos fan before, but Tim Tebow kind of sucked me in. He's kind of hard not to like with just his inspiration and his good attitude. I like how he brushes it off and just always has a good attitude and continues to go forward. And you can use that in your fight game as well, because you don't always win, but it's how you bring yourself back that matters.
Agreed. He definitely has a good head on his shoulders. A certain following, but also the critics, which I'm sure that you see in the combat fight world as well. So, yeah, I'm quite impressed with him myself, and I thought for sure that you would probably be at least a new fan of his. Yeah, for sure. I like how everybody doubts him and he proves everybody wrong, because I felt like I've been in that situation my whole career.
Well, you brought up a good point, Ed, about how Tim Tebow has a fan base in terms of people like his personality, because there's a lot of people out there knocking him and he just kind of blows it off. But that's even more prevalent in MMA, because people tend to judge the fighters because it's not as much like you represent Colorado, so the fans of Colorado are cheering for you. Like in football, okay, the Denver people are cheering for the Broncos, whereas in MMA, people look at a fighter and they'll say, oh, I don't like Diaz because he comes in with an attitude, or I do like this guy because he's a nice guy. Brian Stamm, he's in the military and he's such a gentleman, or whatever. Some people do or don't like Chael Sonnen because he does a lot of talking. How do you view your image as you go forward as a fighter? Because you're right that the Ultimate Fighter gave you a lot of exposure. There are a lot of fans out there that say, hey, I know this guy, Ed Herman. He was on the Ultimate Fighter. He did good, and I want to see him continue to fight. So how do you think towards developing your image as a fighter?
Well, I think it's been a little mixed over my career. Coming off the Ultimate Fighter, I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder going in there, like I had something to prove, and, I may have came off as somebody with a bad attitude or a disrespectful kid, but I was just a hungry kid who wanted to, prove to the world that I belong. And, sometimes that show can portray you the wrong way. So I feel like I've kind of come back from that. A lot of people realize that I am a respectful athlete and, that I'm a good person and, all that kind of stuff. So, up and down with that. But I like to be perceived as someone who goes out there and lays it on the line every time and respects the sport and respects my opponents.
Well, another question, because a lot of the public, the fans, the followers of MMA don't really know the way the fighters interact. But to give you an example, we just saw at UFC 141 where Nate Diaz was basically in a huge feud with Donald Cerrone, and here these guys are not shaking, they're knocking each other's hat off, they're giving each other the finger, and they're cursing at each other. Then after the fight, having been at the event and got a chance to see the post-fight press conference, these guys are showing a lot of respect for each other and apologizing and basically saying, hey, Cerrone came out and said, hey, he brought his game. He was the better man today. He kicked my butt. And Diaz is saying, you know what? It's, I apologize for knocking his hat off. It's all part of the fight game. Is that something where you guys really have more respect for each other outside of the ring, and when you're promoting, it's more of a matter of trying to get interest in you as a fighter and the fight you're involved in?
Well, I think it can be both. I think the Diaz brothers do a really good job of getting in people's heads. If you saw that fight, Cerrone came out so fired up and pissed off that he wasn't able to fight with a clear head, and I think that I'd respect Diaz and those guys for that, because I've talked to those guys outside of the ring, and they're real humble, mellow guys, so I think a lot of that is just getting in their opponent's head. Some guys hype it up, like Chael does a good job of hyping stuff up. Chael's a really nice dude. I trained with him for a long time. He's gone in a tangent lately on talking a lot of smack, which is funny because it's out of character for him, for the Chael I know. But, it does sell tickets. It does get people interested in the fight. But, again, even if you don't like somebody, you don't respect them, if you get in a good war with them like that, afterwards, it changes things a lot, and you respect them. I've never really had anybody that I dislike too much, except for maybe like when I fought Alan Belcher. I kind of didn't like him. I thought he was kind of a punk. But after getting in there and having a good war with him, I really respected him. Now I see him, I say hi and shake his hand, and I always root for him when he fights. So,
that's cool.
All those there's all those things involved. There's a little bit of all that involved.
Well, I was thinking of writing an article basically calling it, you can yak it up if you can back it up. I think that's where the Diaz brothers come in, because they can talk all the smack they like, because basically when they get in the ring, they back up what they say. They may not win all the time, but they certainly give it, an interesting fight. They always give it their all. They're always coming forward. Do you see yourself as someone who kind of plays it more low-key, or do you see yourself as someone trying to get out there more with the fans and let them know you're in a war?
I'm not a big smack talker myself, but I appreciate a good war, but, I'm not talking smack isn't really my thing. I'll show it in the ring. If I have a reason to talk smack, I will. If someone starts, talking crap to me, I'm gonna come right back for sure. But in general, I like to just do my talking in the cage. A little bit cliche, but again, like I said, coming off the show, a lot of people thought, I was a little bit of a punk or whatnot. So I think I've been kind of trying to recover that image a little bit and just prove to people that I'm a good dude and someone that they want to root for and support.
Yeah, well, I do think you do have that image where people tend to enjoy watching you fight. They want to root for you. They want to see you do well. If let me throw this question out to you. If you weren't fighting on the card, which of the fights that are on that same card would you say, hey, this is a fight I want to see, other than your own?
The one I'm going to be on, definitely, Diaz and Condit, I think is going to be a great scrap. Both those guys come in fired up. I really think that's going to be a good fight.
Now, from your experience, how do you think a fight like that's going to go? I mean, Condit was supposed to fight GSP and on and off, and Nick just coming over from Strikeforce and yet winning his fight. What are your thoughts on that?
It's hard to say, man, because I'm always wrong. I got friends who are always trying to get my advice for betting, and I'm always wrong.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about this sport is you can think a guy's going to win because of this or that, but you can get proven wrong so fast.
And
it's kind of how the guy performs that night in different style matchups. You know what I'm saying?
And that's so funny because when I was at UFC 141, I saw so many people that are on the inside industry. There was Mike Straka, and he thought Brock was going to destroy Overeem, and in fact, I saw Punk Ass, after the fight, and I'm talking with him, and then he said, he lost a bunch of money betting on Brock, and it's just funny how the people that you think are closest to MMA would be better at predicting the fights, and yet it's funny because you find out later that they're really not necessarily better. Although on our show we had Mike Van Arsdale as a co-host for a while there, and man, he can talk a good game, and in terms of knowing the ins and outs, and he predicted from the get-go that Overeem was going to destroy Brock, and it was interesting to hear his take on it long before the fight was even close. So I appreciate the fact that you're sharing that oftentimes when you evaluate fights, you're not necessarily right. I mean, another fight that I was afraid of calling was when Brian Stan fought Chael Sonnen, and yet that just was such an overwhelming win for Chael that it was surprising to me because everybody had seen Brian do so well up until that point.
Yeah, but at the same time, the styles makes fights, so I think Brian had the right fights in front of him. Like Chris Lieben was a really tough fight, but it was a good style matchup for Brian because Chris kind of comes forward throwing wide punches, and Brian throws good straight hard punches. So I knew that was a bad matchup for Stan, having worked out with both of them. But Chael did dominate just amazingly. He looked great. He's really picked it up over the last couple of years and really showcased his skills. But yeah, it's all about different styles. You know what I'm saying? One guy
Sure.
can be on a tear. It's just the right style that comes in. It can change his whole day.
Well, that's a good point. That really is. And we really appreciate you just taking the time to join us. So is there anybody you want to give a shout out to in terms of sponsors or friends out there?
Yeah, I'd like to thank The Throne and Rev Gear for sticking by me for all the years, as well as, all my training partners at The Grudge in Denver and Easton Jiu-Jitsu, Factory X Muay Thai, all my old school training partners at Team Quest, and the guys at my gym, Trials MMA, all my students who support me like a family. And we got a great new gym out here in Colorado. It's got a good family feel, and it's really great how MMA can bring people together in such a positive way.
I do think that when you're together, that struggle draws you closer together. I mean, one of the other camps that we hear a lot about is Uriah Faber with his team. You sense that camaraderie? Is that an accurate description of how it is when you have a team together?
For sure, man. This is a one-on-one sport when you're in the cage, but you need a good team behind you to help you get ready. It's hard to do this sport by yourself. Physically and mentally, you need that support from your teammates, because you go to war with each other every day in practice, and then they're there with you when you battle in the cage.
Now, when you were on The Ultimate Fighter, how did they address either encouraging people to be a little bit, I don't know how to say it, maybe silly or goofy, or was it something that they try to play down? Because some of those shows, you'll see guys are trashing things or playing pranks, getting other people upset. Is that something they say, hey, we're going for TV, so if you want to do something, go for it? Or is it just unspoken and it just happens?
I think everybody deals with it their own way, but 6 weeks doesn't seem like a long time. But when you're, locked in that house and you can't do anything else, there's no TV, there's no radio, you can't talk to your wife or your kids, you start to lose your mind a little bit. It's like, a little bit of cabin fever, really. So I feel like on my episodes, I was acting pretty crazy towards the end, and I think a lot of guys, start to lose it a little bit because you're out of your element, you're away from everything that you know. You're forced to be in this house with a bunch of random guys with different attitudes and coming from different places. So I think people deal with it their own ways, and people have different personalities. Like some guys are jokers, and that's just the way they are, and that helps them get by and deal with the time. Just like, I guess, if people are in prison, they deal with things different ways. Some guys hit the book, some guys go to the dark side. Not to say that it's like being in prison, but just kind of that cabin fever, man. You really start to lose it a little bit.
Sure, and I would tend to think that some of the relationships you build are either very positive, like, hey, I've got a new good friend, or just the opposite. Here, this is a guy I can't stand. I can't wait to get in the ring and fight this guy. Were there anybody that you went through where you felt like, hey, now I've got a good friend because we went through this experience together, or here's a guy I just wanted to punch his lights out?
It's kind of funny because you do build relationships with guys, and I haven't really kept in contact with too many of the guys where you think you will, because you spend that time together and you feel like, it's almost like a brotherhood. I see those guys and it's like, you hug and you talk and things like that, but it's, it's kind of hard to keep in touch even with good friends that you've had known for a long time in this world. But there was one guy like Rory Singer. I couldn't stand him on the show. I wanted to kill that guy, But after the show's over, man, I almost felt bad for being mean to him and stuff, because he is a really good dude. He's a really good person. He's just like, if you had a roommate before who's like your best friend, and then you live with them, and they start to drive you crazy, all the little things that they do, and you can grow apart like pretty fast. Yeah.
Well, I think The Ultimate Fighter is one show that certainly turned MMA into a household name in terms of exposing us to the fighters and getting us to see them as people and really enjoying them. So we appreciate you being on it. We're looking forward to you fighting soon, and we're looking forward to watching your career as you pull off win after win. So hopefully that goes well for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I got one more shout out too. My good friend Chris Levin got married today, so I want to give him a congratulations. But I appreciate you guys having me on, and I appreciate all the fans and everybody sticking by me through all the hard times.
Well, we appreciate you taking your time to join us, and thank you. And we do send our own congratulations to Chris, and hopefully you guys will both have a continued successful career. And we look forward to seeing more of your fights down the road. Thank you so much, Ed.
Hey, great, guys. Great interview, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right.